Rowe, great to see you again.
Good to see you too.
Hey, you are a three-code football star. So how do you define, or what sport do you define actual football as?
Gaelic football in Ireland, if anyone hasn't guessed by my accent, Irish, but Gaelic football is definitely football for me.
What about AFL footy?
AFL footy is no, the next one is then soccer, and then the last one is AFL football.
Okay, so footy is Gaelic football, soccer football is soccer, and
Yeah.
AFL is AFL. All right, I'm glad we clarified that. Hey, you've just come back from a couple of weeks in America with your Collingwood AFL colleagues. Talk me through what that was about.
Yeah, so it was like a pre-season camp. So we went over and trained in a gym called Exos, and we got coaching from coaches who coach a lot of NFL players over there, just to get, I suppose, fresh eyes on us, a different perspective, and kind of see what way Americans, how they prepare, and how it might be different to Australia, and what learnings we could take back for ourselves as individual athletes and also for our group. So we basically trained in the morning with speed, acceleration, and power, and then we'd have rest and recover, physio, and all that. And then we would have a gym session in the evening. They also like fed us, did all our body composition, and then kind of like structured our goals in terms of our training, and did a lot of testing with us over the 2 weeks. So it was hugely beneficial. We definitely learned a lot about ourselves and kind of figured out where we were weak, where we needed to improve. And yeah, it was hugely worthwhile.
Yeah, bringing those learning back to your own environment is something we're constantly doing. I guess one of the values of these sort of conversations is to allow the people listening in to dig into some of the learnings that you're going to provide. So I like to start by letting people know how we get connected to each other. And you had a short stint with Melbourne Victory a couple of seasons ago, in between AFL seasons, and you wanted to kind of make a big push for the Women's World Cup. So you had a short stint with us, and then went back to Ireland to continue your football development over there. Talk me through how you came to Melbourne Victory, and then what the opportunity back in Ireland was like.
Yeah, it was an interesting journey. I think I was at the point with AFL where I was like, it's not the sport I've grown up playing. It's not, I suppose, my first love. My first love is Gaelic football or soccer. You know, when you grow up playing a sport, you have a different love and probably understanding for it. But I was away from soccer for 8 years prior to going back to Victory, so extremely rusty. But I just had this, I suppose, itch or hunger to go back and try something different. And I said, regardless of the World Cup or not, I know that I'll really love playing the sport. So I just reached out to Jeff at the time and a couple of coaches around Melbourne, tried to suss out what soccer in Melbourne was like, and then just showed Jeff a few clips of when I was younger and when I was playing with my team at home. But like, I was like, I feel like I'm a different athlete now. I've prepared differently. I've trained essentially to be an AFL player versus being a soccer player. So I'm going to have probably gained in some areas and lost in others, and my touch and all that. So anyway, Jeff was kind of like, look, as a can maybe I can just train with you guys, and then after a couple of weeks, see how I go. And I think after the first few weeks, I was like, I'm so far removed from where I need to be, or where I believe I can get to, that it was, yeah, it was very confronting, I would say. And I think that was great though, because I had all, like you guys, I had such great coaches around me to kind of help the transition be a small bit smoother. But like, my abiding memory is when Caitlin Friend put 10 cones in front of me and said dribble through them, and I knocked every cone. But in my head, I was like, this is easy. I've done this my whole life as a kid. But it's like saying you study to be a doctor and you step out of that world for 8 years, you're probably going to forget a lot of things that you learned and that you knew and were so familiar with. So for me, it was like relearning those skills again, learning to walk again in the sport, essentially. And then, things got better, but really ultimately what I needed was more games and more games. But being in Victory was an amazing starting point for me. And then I kind of was like, the Victory season was coming to an end, close enough to an end. I needed games. So I was like, I'm going to go home and play in Ireland, where I was going to get the opportunity to play at least 12 to 14 games. And in that time, I feel like I improved a massive amount by just being put in different situations and kind of being challenged. And by the end of the 6 months, essentially, of the transition, I felt like I was more or less back to where I would want to be. And I got close in ways to the World Cup team. But I didn't quite make it. So when I say close, I was on standby. So just 2 weeks before the World Cup squad was to be announced, I was called into the home based training camp, and basically the coach was like, I didn't think you could get here in this short a period of time. So she's like, for that reason, I'm putting you on standby. So I was close, but I kind of knew myself. I was like, I needed more time. Like I needed a game, like to I needed a couple of more games to get to that level. I really questioned my decision making on coming back to Australia and playing AFL as to whether I wanted to pursue soccer and maybe try play somewhere in Europe or like do something different. But I'd kind of committed to Collingwood, and I was like, I owe Collingwood and my teammates, my word. I've said I was coming back. So I came back, and last year then played with Collingwood, and now I suppose I still have that love and hunger for soccer, but right now I'm focusing on AFL.
Yeah, an incredible story, and to get so close to a pinnacle senior event like that, from having starting way back the way you did, is incredible, and just sort of highlights your journey as a multi-sport athlete to achieve certain things over a short period of time. If I go back a little bit now to maybe growing up in Ireland, so what came first, Gaelic football or soccer football, or was it kind of both at the same time?
Both at the same time. Played Gaelic football and soccer up until I was 20 years of age. So at that time I was playing Gaelic football for Mayo, and then I was playing soccer for Ireland. So trying to balance between the two was quite difficult, as you'd imagine, and you always felt like you were letting someone down. So there was a time where I just focused purely on soccer, and that year we got to the European finals and probably excelled to my potential in soccer in that year. And then the following year I decided to focus on Gaelic football for a full year. And then from that came the opportunity to go and play for Collingwood. So I never planned on leaving soccer for such a long time, but the AFL opportunity came in the middle of that. And my thought process was the opportunity to challenge myself in a new sport, in a new environment, in a new country is something that I would love to do, and also to be in a professional environment. And when I saw the resources that Collingwood had and the AFL in general, I was like, this is something I felt like I was just going to do for a year. But then obviously you do it for a year, it takes time to get good at anything. And it was a challenging journey at the start. And you never want to leave something until you feel like you've got to where you believe you can. So I think it's been a journey.
What is Gaelic football for those not quite sure what it is?
It's a bit like AFL with a round ball and no contact. And instead of kicking through three posts, there's underneath here is a goal like a soccer goal, and then above is a point. So that's how you score. So the soccer goal is worth 3 points, and then if you kick over the bar, it's worth a point.
So I guess
it's a bit different.
I guess it sort of sits between soccer football and AFL football, right? It's kind of a hybrid
Yeah.
of both, and I guess it's the Australian version of AFL is probably the Australian version of Gaelic football, as Gaelic football is for AFL in Ireland. How big is the sport? Just give us a context. Like, is it that, compared to football or to rugby, where does Gaelic football sit in terms of the Irish sporting landscape?
In terms of Ireland, I would say that Gaelic football is probably our number one sport in Ireland, and then rugby probably second. People would argue between the two now, which is first and second there. But I would say that Gaelic football is our main sport, but it's also amateur. So people play for the place that they play for the town that they've grown up with in their whole life, or their county. So you never leave your team. Like, it's not that whole thing with soccer where you go to another club or whatever. So you stay with that team. So I think that brings a whole other level to it. It's like, the level of emotion that brings. It's, you know, it's your pride of place, it's your community, it's your family. Like, that's what you're doing it for. So that changes obviously when you get to the professional world. But in terms of how big the sport is, well, the All Ireland final that I played in, which is the equivalent to a grand final over here, there was 50,000 at the game. So that's where the women's game is at. But in terms of the games leading up to that, like a league game or like a semi-final, you wouldn't have those same numbers. But when it comes to finals and big games at the end of the year, you get massive crowds.
Yeah, it's a big sport, and for someone who's reached the pinnacle of that, and I guess one of many other pinnacle events you've reached is impressive. So, what about the transferability is what I'm quite keen to find out a little bit more about, from footy to Gaelic football, even on to AFL. Like, what's your take on the pros and maybe the cons as well around transferability of similar-minded sports, similar abled sports? Is it a good thing in your opinion, or specialising in maybe just one of those three would have been a better long-term play for you?
Well, this is the overarching question that I'm consistently asking myself, I think, because, you know, you wonder that, like, are you closer to success in one sport and then you essentially leave the sport and go to another sport? I think I thrive in the challenge and change of that. And I think that's taught me a lot as an athlete in terms of resilience and in terms of being like, I, I'm not, every time I transition back to another sport, it's extremely hard because it's like, again, like you said, you've trained to be something else for such a long period of time. So when I look at AFL, I think that we do quite a lot of endurance work and strength work. But then when I went back to soccer, I realized that my agility wasn't as good as it used to be, and my acceleration wasn't as good as it used to be. And that's where I felt the gap in my training with soccer. And then you train that, and I feel like AFL didn't necessarily complement my soccer, but soccer complemented my AFL when I went back. But when I went back to AFL after playing soccer, I was about 3 kg lighter and I had done less gym work, but I was probably quicker on my feet. But then when I was getting tackled, and obviously with AFL, you can get tackled from a 360 angle, my body probably couldn't take that side of the game. So then I had to try get the happy medium between getting myself stronger, putting on more weight, and then being able to withstand what, you know, it requires in the contact side of the game. But in terms of my ability to move and get past a player, I was better for it after going to soccer. And so there's different parts of the game that I think complement. But I do think soccer complemented AFL for me last season. And I think that Gaelic football probably complements AFL as well. But I'm not sure if AFL complements soccer or Gaelic. That's the way I feel, because every time I find it way harder to transition on the other side. Whereas going back to AFL, the transition feels a bit easier.
What about the mental side, maybe the social side of being across three different codes compared to maybe just one? Do you find that was something that was beneficial in the long term in terms of, you know, staying as a high performing athlete that you are, or chopping and changing from obviously different peer groups to different codes, irrespective of the country you're playing in? You know, what sort of advice would you have to athletes and parents listening to that of kids who are maybe thinking about trying to play in multiple sports at the same time?
Yeah, it's definitely a difficult one, and going into different environments is like every time. Like, I remember going into Victory at one point, and I was like, how do I show my new teammates that I care and that I'm here to work hard? And I think the only way to do it is to do it, essentially, and to show them, because, like, I think that the most important thing is that you have the respect of your teammates, and that you can work with them and work really well with the coaches. So for me, that's what I've proven it every single day and everything I do in my application to training. So I went into the Victory environment and I was like, well, I'm just going to show them that I'm a hard worker first, because I think people can always respect hard work, regardless of if you get there or you don't, they can always respect that. So, and then also show my teammates that I care. And that's by connecting and having conversations with them, because then I think if you can connect off the field, you can also connect on the field. But yeah, it's a hard transition because you're essentially uncomfortable in your training, because no, you're not where you need to be, and then you're uncomfortable in your actual environment as well, and you're trying to figure out that, navigate that. What's your acceptable cultural norms in Victory, for example, in soccer, or in AFL, or in Gaelic football? They're all quite similar, but all different in ways. And then you look at the common traits between successful teams and unsuccessful teams, and what are the habits of successful teams and what are the habits of unsuccessful teams. And that would be where I feel like I have a perspective that I would say that is really worthwhile to me, and that's from being thrown into so many different environments and going, hold on, this is the way they do it here. Do you think we could do it this way? Or I found this worked in a different environment. And because the way you do things sometimes for such a long time sometimes just becomes like that's the only way you can do things. But like if you walk into another environment and you kind of get perspective and go, it's actually not the only way. Like you can do it different ways and get different results. But sometimes I think in sporting environments we can get caught in our ways, as things have to be done a certain way. So I think for that reason it's given me great perspective. But I do think, yeah, there has been a lot of challenges with it, but I've always sat in embrace this. That with challenge becomes there's change, and that's going to be hard, but you're always going to come out the other side of that. And so you just have to sit through that hard part, I reckon, but know that I think when you know with sport that you're always going to be faced with obstacles, if you can prepare that there's going to be obstacles, you're going to get hard feedback, you're always better and ready to equipped to respond. Where sometimes we get feedback and we're like, didn't expect that, I didn't want that, and but welcome that stuff is what I would say.
Yeah, that broader perspective is important. One of the perspectives that you are quite uniquely placed is you've experienced coming into a new culture, being in a new country in Australia. So a lot of athletes listening to this would be probably excelling in their own country, and maybe one of the moves that they will need to make at some point is to go abroad into a foreign country, foreign language, foreign culture. How did you, what can you share around your learnings of coming to Australia, which is different to Ireland, and some of the things that you've picked up and adapted quickly that's helped you settle quicker than maybe than some others? Because it's a really big piece of settling quickly into a new country to allow yourself the best chance to go and perform your qualities in whatever chosen sport you have.
Yeah, definitely. It's a big point, and you would understand this as well coming from New Zealand. I'm sure there's things that you guys do differently over there as well. But there's one thing that really jumps out to me when you say that it's being able to understand the Australian culture has been huge. So because the way Australians communicate is different to the way Irish communicate. Like Irish people communicate through humor often, but there's generally a message in the humor. They might say something as a joke, but you understand what they're trying to say. And whereas in Australia, that mightn't be as, while there is a laugh and a joke and all that stuff, it mightn't be as acceptable in a working environment, or it would be like, maybe a bit softer in the approach in Australia, whereas Irish people will be very direct and kind of honest. So sometimes like it's that communication barrier. So I always have to really try to understand my environment, understand the people in it, and ask questions as to when I don't understand things, get complete clarity. So like I say, if I'm in a meeting with a coach, I'm not leaving that meeting until I understand exactly what they're saying. I won't leave things up in the air. So sometimes I find people go, the coach said this to me, and they're sitting and stewing on that one thing that the coach said that could be feedback around the way they're handling themselves in the environment, or even the way they're doing something on the field. Whereas, for me, I try to sit in that room and go, what exactly do you mean by that? Can you walk me through that? Can you show me that? And where are you seeing this from me? And how do I change it? So it's the follow-up questions to get the answers that you need, rather than going away from conversations and going like, I'm not quite clear on what he meant there. And then the player being in a state of confusion, and the coach not thinking they communicated the message, but it wasn't the message that they needed to hear. So, you could throw away one comment and think that they understand what you're saying. Check for understanding is what I would say as a coach. And as a player, ask for that clarity all the time. That's the way I feel that's been a massive part. And the other part is understanding Australian culture, which takes time and takes really putting yourself out there and having the conversation and go, hey, why do you guys do it like this? Or like just understanding it. And once you understand it, it's easier, it's an easier problem to solve. But at the start, I remember there's things that I'd look at and go, that's not how we would do it in our, and like I'd sit in the team meeting and go, I just don't understand why that's the way they communicated the message or whatever. So again, checking for understanding and constant communication. But yeah, I'm essentially stepping into an Australian world. You're outnumbered in ways, so you really need to understand their world, but you also need to explain to them the world that you are coming from, and go, well, this is the why I do things like this. Or even from a coaching point of view, sometimes the coach says to me, "What were you thinking there?" And I was like, to be honest, I probably was in a Gaelic football mindset there. This is what I was thinking. This is where I thought the ball was going to go. And that's what the transitioning through sports sometimes does. I sometimes find myself in positions where when I'm out of the game a while, I get into bad habits from the other sport. So, yeah.
You brought in coaching there. So let's just sit on that for a little bit of time now. You've no doubt experienced some incredible coaches in different countries, in different sports. Is there some common traits, common behaviors that have tied these better coaches together that you can think of?
Yeah, definitely. I think coaching for me, and now everyone responds differently, but I really respond well to a direct style of coaching and just tell me the truth, I can handle it. Always tell me the truth. And tell me, so instead of saying to me, for example, Rowe, you're crossing, and your corners have been really poor in the last couple of games. I'd be like, don't tell me the problem without telling me the solution. So if you're coming to me with a problem, you come to me with a solution as to how I fix it and what I was doing wrong and why my habits had led to that point. So again, not every player has the confidence to say that to a coach or to communicate with them. But so that's for me really important. And the other part is getting to know the individual and how they like to be communicated with. So I work a bit with performance by design, which is where you profile people and you get to understand like how people like to be communicated with and how people respond best. So for me, it's like direct feedback. Give me 2 to 3 points and I'll do it. But if you give me way too many words and explain it too much, you've confused me and you've overcomplicated things. Now I know other people who want more information and need that, where I'm like, no, I want to keep it simple. I'll ask why. I'll always ask why you want me to do that. But it's understanding the individual and what makes them tick as well. So that again takes time.
Yeah, knowing your players is one of the first things that I remember being taught as a coach on an early coaching course is know your players first, and without creating that bond is one, but understanding what works for them, how they like to be communicated to, what their learning style is, that's just effective coaching, in my opinion. So that's a no-brainer. Anything else that you can think of, or think back to the coaches that maybe hasn't resonated as well with you, things that they didn't do as well as you would have liked?
Well, the coaches that I responded well to, what they always did is challenge me to the point of nearly making me angry, which nearly made me always respond. And that works for me. So it would be a coach that I know that they believe in me. They show me in all their actions that they care, because if I ever needed extra help or I want to do extra skills or whatever, extra vision, they're there. They show me with care that they'll always be there when I need them, but they'll also push me and say like, that's not good enough. And I really respect that from a coach, because I'm like, you have to be able to take feedback. Like sport's hard. It's the only way you're going to get better. Like clear is kind and being honest is kind. Like, so being upfront for me is the biggest thing. And there's been times where I have, when I was think back to when I was younger, of some of the best coaches that I had, where they used to get so mad at me for things that I used to do, and we used to challenge each other, and I used to disagree with them, they used to disagree with me. But when all was said and done, it was respect. Like there has to be a level of respect there. But the only way you're going to respect them is if you trust them, and they have to be competent at what they do themselves, and they also have to have a good character. So like when you talk about trust, it's like competence and character for me.
If you're speaking directly to coaches working with pre-performance athletes, so not quite in the space that you would interact with on your daily basis, but maybe going back, 5 or 6 years ago, is anything maybe a little bit more unique or bespoke to coaches in that phase of development of athletes compared to what we sort of just been talking about now in the professional space?
Mm. Like I look at some younger athletes who are growing up in Australia and looking at the resources that they have, like in terms of learning about strength and conditioning and all that stuff. I'm like, I don't remember ever having them opportunities when I was a young athlete. So like the opportunities that athletes have nowadays and the quality of coaching they have from a young age, I think is far greater. So I think it's to kind of understand that, and for them to teach the younger athletes just really good habits and really good practice. How do you teach them how to work hard? Because that's the fundamental quality of any great player, really, is the player who can essentially work the hardest. And like, you can have all the talent, like we say, you can have all the talent in the world, but if you're not going to work hard and be diligent and disciplined around everything, how do you teach a player that? It's like it comes from innately in some players, and then other players can learn it later throughout their career. So it's about forming those habits from a young age. I think that, being on time, like the small things really matter. Like you never forget those coaches, like coaches who made me kick with my left foot when I was 12 years of age. And I was like, why? They said, well, every great player is going to have to with their left foot. And now I'm grateful that I kick with both feet. But I wouldn't have had that if someone didn't push me from a young age to do that. So it's like all those small things. And again, showing your players that you care and that you'll be there. They'll always respect that.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And teaching habits, showing care, respect, and gently pushing. Well, I know that there's also another set of support people that do that, mainly parents. So maybe talk to me about your parents, the role that they played through your formative years, and maybe what role they play today in terms of the support they can offer from being back on the other side of the world.
Yeah, parents are massive. I couldn't be more fortunate with my parents, and I'm very conscious of the fact that not everyone has that support. But I think it's made my journey a hell of a lot easier because I always knew I had my biggest fans behind me. So I always knew that they supported me more than anyone else. And mum and dad did that through showing up to my games. And I always remember not being able to settle into my games until I saw mum or dad's face at the other side of the fence. So I remember things, and then I always wanted to show off in front of them. I always wanted to show them how, if I played well, like I needed to know what they thought of me. It was like I was looking for constant approval off my parents. But my dad in particular is like, mum supports me in terms of how I'm going, how's my life, and kind of everything outside sport. Whereas dad supports me, and I'm probably like the boy he never had, in ways that he's like loves to talk to me about all things sport all the time. So we would dissect games, and from a very young age, I remember him being just really honest with me as well, and going, "You're about a 9 out of 10 today," and then the next day he could be like, "I'll give you a 4 out of 10 today," and he goes, "Because I know you can do better than that, and this is why." And so he was in ways my best coach. But again, how did he do that? He literally turns up all the time, and it's hard when you're working away or whatever. But it's like, or even that constant check in to go, tell me about the game, and just listening to me, and understanding my frustrations. Like even with the victory stuff, I remember last year ringing dad and being like, "This is really hard," and he was like, "Well, you knew it was going to be," and he was always the sounding board to go, just like, keep going. You're capable. So it was that belief as well that he had in me.
Is he still acting as that sounding board for you now? And you're going into a new AFL season. Like, what? Walk me through the sort of responsibilities and actions that he provides you for now.
Yeah, I have to say he is, like, he's my a guiding light, I would say, and it's in ways it's scary that you have that dependence on a parent at the tender age of 28, but it's like you kind of he's still that for me, and it's still like after every game he could be in Ireland watching my game at 3 a.m. in the morning, and when I wake up I'll have a long winded essay style message of what he thought of the game. But that for me, like, that means a lot, and he knows that, like, I appreciate that, but he also absolutely loves it. So I think he's always there. And even just things like your parents are objective views on things. They know you better than anyone else. They know what you're trying to put out. And like even if things happen in team environments, which they always do, like in terms of teamwork stuff or frustrations that you have with coaches, you can always talk to parents who are voices of reason, or hopefully are voices of reason for you, where they just go. My mum is a great one of going like, she says something to me, she goes, "You're actually just too serious at the moment. You're taking life too seriously. Like sport is not the be all and end all. Step out of your own realm. There's other things going on in life." And then it kind of brings me, she's great at giving me perspective and going, there's other things happening in the world. And if you keep divulging too much energy into one space, you get too serious and it doesn't actually help your performance either. So yeah, I've the perfect mix between dad going through all the detail with me and mum telling me to just liven up and just like, she's like, "I'm sick of hearing about performance." She's like, "Get over it. No one else cares." So like that's great for me as well.
Yeah, you're in a fantastically fortunate position where no doubt both parents have helped support your journey, and it has had a positive impact on the progression you've made and the success you've achieved. Not everybody is as fortunate. So if you're talking now to parents or support people, can be extended family members, it can be guardians, it can be, a whole raft of people who come under the support banner. If you're acting as a support person and you maybe can't be quite as connected as your mum and dad are, what are some of the ideas or tips that you would give to those people in ways that they can make a positive difference?
Well, I think like something as simple as honestly just sending a message. Like I think that I always think as well in a team environment, if you think something good about someone, just tell them. Because often we think all these great things about players, and I'm sure you as well as a coach, like sometimes you're reluctant to do it. But when you say, like if a player comes up to you and says, "I've really noticed that you've been really focused the last 2 weeks. I see what you're trying to do and it's really working." Like that means the world to a player and it gives them a whole lot of confidence, which then should translate into better performance. So it's small things like that can really have a positive impact on players. And I think then in terms of not having a support network, it's like depending on what sporting environment you're in, but like sports psychology has been massive for me as well. But I think it's just, yeah, again, it's just finding that person that it may not be a parent, it may be a friend, it may be a teammate, finding that person and being able to kind of always bounce things off it, because sometimes it's just like energy in your head, that's energy in motion, emotion, as they say. And that you just, it's not really reasonable, and your self-talk mightn't be great and you need to kind of just get it out to understand it.
Rowie, this has been a great chat. I know that we're on a time limit here because you've got more trainings to head off to. So we're going to move into our rapid fire questions in our repeat after me section. So one question I'd like to set the audience is,
Who's the most fascinating person you've ever met and why?
two questions there, I like it. One concept or idea that I have in my mind at the minute is,
That's a good one. Say that again.
one concept or an idea that I have been thinking about is,
Is I probably think about this a lot, but it's how do you get different combinations and personalities working together when you have two or three or five strong personalities in a room and with very strong beliefs. How do you, I suppose, bridge that gap in order to help the team environment?
a book, movie, TV series, or podcast that I would recommend is,
The Diary of the CEO for podcast and the 5 a.m. Club for a book.
nice. If I had a magic wand and could wave it, that would change one thing about my sport or my sports system, what would that be?
I would play AFL with a round ball.
One piece of advice that I was given is,
March to the beat of your own drum.
nice, I like that. One thing or the thing that I am striving for today is,
Probably just in competition with myself. I'm trying to beat myself all the time, so that's what I'm focusing on.
Nice. And to finish it off, the quote for the week is,
Those who mind don't matter, and those who matter don't mind.
brilliant. Sarah, Rowe, fantastic conversation. Hopefully everybody understood. I'll put the words up at the bottom of the video so we can read along as we listen. All the very best for the upcoming AFL season. It's been a pleasure to reconnect. Yeah, look forward to seeing you out on the training pitch.
Thanks a million, Gareth. Great to connect.
Thanks so much for sticking through to the end of this episode. It would mean the world to us if you could hit the like or share button so we can get these amazing insights out to other like-minded coaches, athletes, and parents. Cheers.